Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here today. My name is Raj, and I'm a sophomore studying health policy and statistics. And I'm a social science editor for UNC Journey, which is the journal of undergraduate research here at UNC. So today's session is going to be all about just like mastering the art of conducting a literature search and using citation managers effectively. And before we kind of jump in, I just want to say that the QR code for the CLE credit is only going to be available at the end of the session. So make sure you stay with us until the very last slide if you want that code. And also feel free to stop me for questions at any point throughout the presentation. So over the next 45 minutes, we'll kind of cover what a literature review is and why it's kind of crucial for your research. And we're going to talk about like the step-by-step process of just conducting an overall literature review. And then we'll also talk about tools like Zotero and MyBib to just make your research process just overall smoother. So kind of starting off with the basics, what exactly is a literature review? So a literature review is more than just summarizing research papers. It's actually about kind of understanding the existing body of knowledge in the field that you're interested in, like whatever you're researching, and actually kind of positioning yourself in the research within it. So imagine it kind of like a conversation where you're like identifying what's been said already in the literature and what hasn't been said, and where kind of your voice fits in when you're doing your research paper. So like an example would be if you're like studying caffeine stress level effects among college students, your literature review might explore like the gaps that are not already in existing literature. And it can also kind of explore just the studies linking stress and dietary habits overall. So it's kind of just like anything that you're interested in is what you can perform with literature review. So conducting literature review kind of has six key steps, and each step is really critical to ensure that your work is actually being credible when you're finished with it. And we'll spend time on each one, but just kind of like a broad overview. Step one is to define your subject of research. This is kind of like ensuring that your research that you're doing is actually focused and it can actually be like researchable. Step two is obviously developing a strategy. This is kind of like creating a roadmap for finding relevant studies. And step three is going to be locating the actual information. So once you develop that strategy, actually finding the resources that you need. And that's going to be kind of where databases come into play and how citation tools come into play. Step four is evaluating the information. Not all sources are obviously going to be credible. Like you can't use a source from a magazine. You're going to focus on PubMed and stuff that is actually credible. So we'll kind of learn how to assess credibility. Step five is synthesizing everything that you have. This is kind of like tying everything together, identifying the patterns, and just all the key insights that you kind of developed from all of the research that you did in the literature review. And step six, which is the last step, is to just evaluating and ensuring that your literature review is comprehensive and logical. And now we'll dive into, I guess, step one, which is defining your research subject. And that's kind of the foundation of having that successful literature review. And choosing a topic that you're truly passionate about is obviously key. Like you need to ensure that you're going to be engaged and not get bored when you're actually performing the research. But like just being passionate about it isn't enough because your topic must also be like manageable in scope. So I can't just be like, I'm passionate about the NFL and have no idea what I'm going to progress after I'm passionate about the NFL. It needs to actually be focused and researchable. And an example that I kind of have is let's say that your initial idea is like software programming, right? Like that's too far broad in a literature review because that's going to include like thousands of papers that are spanning decades all the way from the 1900s on what software programming is. Like that's just too broad. And kind of narrowing it down, imagine you go from software programming to, oh, I want to research programming languages. That's still pretty broad. Like what type of programming languages are you talking about? Python, R, what does programming languages even mean? And even narrowing that down even more, imagine you're saying language classifications. That's still kind of broad because there can be different type of classifications. There can be object-oriented programming, there can be functional programming, and kind of narrowing it down to functional programming is actually a topic that is something that's specific and that's something that you can actually kind of develop something out of. So kind of building off of that, a few qualities of a well-defined research question is make sure it's clear. You need to avoid jargon. Your topic should be understandable to a wide range of audiences. Make sure it's focused. Like I said before, it needs to be narrow enough to avoid overwhelming amounts of information, but it also needs to essentially be specific. And it also has to be researchable. There must be enough data or methods to actually explore your question. Like you can obviously do a question that hasn't been explored before, but there has to be some connected research to it to at least make sure that you can answer the thing at hand. And it obviously has to be relevant. It needs to address some gap in your field. It can't just be about something completely random. Like obviously you have to be passionate about it, but it just can't be completely something random. And if it's complex, it's kind of better because you're not just answering like a yes or no question. And that kind of bridges into how to actually word a research question. It goes back to what we learned in middle school. You can't have a research question that just says, is caffeine harmful? Like that's just a yes or no question. Instead, you should start with phrases like how it does, or what is the relationship between, or kind of like what factors influence anything. And a good example of a research question that I kind of came up with is what is the impact of excessive caffeine consumption greater than 400 milligrams on perceived stress levels, PSS, among UNC undergraduate students in the College of Arts and Sciences? So that's relevant, that's specific, and that can also be measurable. It isn't just something completely random. And once you've kind of defined your research subject, so like once you have the research question down, now we're kind of getting into step two. And the next step is to actually create a solid search strategy. And a search strategy helps you navigate the overwhelming amount of information out there and find studies that are actually kind of relevant to your topic. So to create one, you can start by identifying the main keywords for your topic. So this can be like from your research question, like just have some keywords that you choose. And or it could be just related terms in general, like it could be synonyms that also might appear in the research search. And using Boolean operators is something that I'll get into in the next slide as well. But it's extremely critical that when you're actually searching for literature after you create your research question, to use Boolean operators like and, or not, because it allows you to kind of exclude or combine terms that are going to be necessary for the literature that you want to kind of come up with. And applying filters is also something that you do, just like narrowing it down by publication date. Like if you're performing research right now, something from 1985 won't be as useful as something conducted 5 years ago. So kind of narrowing the date down and the language down will also help. And the tools to use when you're performing all of this, when you're finding these credible sources, some of the best ones out there are PubMed, which many of you probably already have heard of. JSTOR, again, something that you guys probably already heard of. And all this is accessible from UNC when you log in. And Google Scholar is also really big. And you can also kind of citation chain, which I'll get into in the next slide. So yeah, like I mentioned before, using Boolean operators when you were searching like keywords like and or not is really critical. So for example, obesity and adolescence kind of narrows your search down, while obesity and not diabetes kind of creates unrelated results. And we'll do a walkthrough of all of this. So like we're gonna do step by step of a literature review, so it's kind of gonna flow better. But that's what you essentially do with Booleans. And including keyword synonyms, again, you can do physical activity or exercise or fitness to cover a range of related items and not just one specific item. And you can also search for exact phrases. When you put quotation marks around a specific word in the search bar, you're going to get literature that has that exact phrase in it. And you can also kind of apply an asterisk. So if you put like child and put asterisk after, it's going to capture child, children, and childhood. So anything that starts with child is going to come, and then you put the asterisk after, and it's going to be everything that has the first word in it in the beginning. And like I mentioned before, obviously use filters and citation chaining. I mentioned in the last slide, but what you do in citation chaining is essentially when you find a specific, like for example, source on Google Scholar, and you go all the way down to its reference section, you can find other sources that were referred in that source and then click on those citations and kind of branch outwards. So it's kind of like you find a source and then you find more just from that source. And yeah, this is the place where I would say you guys can practice kind of having Boolean search strings. And again, like I'll do a walkthrough on it. But the UNC Articles Plus, we have the resource of having just so many articles kind of integrated into one platform. So we should definitely kind of take advantage of what we have here at UNC. So once you have that step two search string down, and once you have your research question, step three is all about locating the information that you need for your literature review. So you need to find credible and relevant sources. So here's an example of the UNC library database. The search query I used Boolean operators like and or, and the search we're looking for here kind of relates obesity and diabetes, and it includes variations of terms like child and children and adults. And on the left-hand side, you can see that there are a lot of filters. Like you can see there's content type like journal articles, newspapers, and just in this case, I've chosen to kind of focus on newspaper articles. But you can also filter by publication date, like I mentioned. And if you're unfamiliar to use like these terms, I mean, in these like kind of items with articles plus with the UNC website, if you go to the librarians, either anywhere throughout campus, like they'll give you tutorials and they'll answer any questions that you'll also have. And once you like locate the information from step three, step four is all about evaluating if that information is actually credible and created equally. So something that a lot of classes here at UNC use is the AACODS kind of acronym, which stands for accuracy, authority, coverage, objectivity, date, and significance. So accuracy is the information that you found like actually correct and free from errors. The authority is who is the author? Like, is it actually a
Date
credible
and
author?
authority. See.
Do you have a question? Okay. The C stands for coverage. If the source like covers the topic comprehensively, and the O is for objectivity. Like, is the source actually unbiased? And the D is the date, which I talked about before. Like, is it recent or is it old? And the S is significance. How relevant is the source to what you're actually researching? And step five is to actually synthesize and create what you've done. So there are many ways that you can actually combine all the information that you found. One thing you can do is group findings by themes. So you're kind of identifying common patterns and trends in the gaps in literature. So for example, if you find a lot of studies that show physical activity reduces obesity, but there are some gaps in kind of understanding its effect on mental health, you're going to group those by the obesity on mental health part and those without on the other. You can also compare and contrast, like you can highlight similarities and differences across a variety of studies. So if study A found a positive correlation between diet and weight loss, but study B showed no significant relationship, you can compare and contrast that in your literature review and say how there's kind of varying research and how there's kind of contrast research. And you can also identify gaps, like when you're doing your literature review and you see how there are some topics that are kind of underexplored or some topics that are missing, you can kind of state that and you can be like, there's few studies that explore how socioeconomic status can actually impact obesity intervention. Like you just note how that's occurring when you're researching in your literature review. And again, summarizing key insights, kind of straightforward. You just create like a concise narrative of what the literature is revealing. So the last step is to evaluate everything that you've done throughout the process. Again, is your review comprehensive? Are you sure that you included a wide range of credible and relevant sources, kind of similar to the AACODS thing? But again, you're just evaluating it from a glance all the way through. You ask yourself if it flows logically. Is a structure that you kind of wrote clear and easy to follow? Is it smooth or is it just is it just messy? And again, sometimes the best things in research is identifying gaps. Like if you find something that hasn't been deeply researched before, that's where most breakthrough discoveries kind of occur. So if that's kind of linked to your research question, it's usually positive, but obviously you need to kind of ensure that you need to state that there's gaps. So now we're going to do kind of like a little walkthrough. So obviously the actual literature review process takes hours and days, but this is kind of like a simplified process, I guess, just for some engagement. So imagine that you're interested in the impact of physical activity on mental health in college students. So what should you do first? Someone can like speak up or type it in the chat. I'll give you guys like a minute. What's the first thing you should do if you're interested in searching the impact of physical activity and mental health? The first step. Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Will. The correct answer, yeah, exactly, is to come up with a research question, right? So An example question for this would be, how does regular physical activity influence perceived stress levels among college students in the Arts and Sciences College at UNC Chapel Hill? I kind of said this question already before, but see how this question is focused, it's relevant, it's narrowed, and it's not just a yes or no question, it's actually really detailed. So that's kind of what we would do first. And this is kind of, it depends on if you're doing the question on a population, but defining the study population is really crucial for focused research questions. This diagram here kind of shows how your research narrows from a broad population to like the actual units under your study. So you're starting with like a broad target population, and then you're going to identify like what actual population can you actually access, and then you're going to define the sample. So for example, if your study is on college students, your sample might only want to include students that actually meet certain criteria. Like in the question before, I said the colleges of arts and sciences. That's not really specific criteria, but my point is like it's narrowed and it's actually the sample instead of saying the whole college population. And here's an example search, which is step 2 and 3 of our question on the UNC library database. The query is combining keywords like physical activity, mental health, and college students using Boolean operators. Again, the filters on the left refine the results further by content type, data, date, and discipline. So it's just a kind of search that I was mentioning this whole kind of time. And then, as mentioned before, I clicked on one of these sources that I found from UNC Articles Plus, and now we need to evaluate the information. So I located this article, and now we need to use the AACODS framework to actually evaluate its quality. I need to make sure that it's credible, it's accurate, it's objective, and it's actually significant to what I'm doing. And for instance, this article right here is examining physical activity's impact on mental health among college students. And by reviewing the abstract methods in the results section, I'm actually going to ensure that it meets our research's needs. And the final step that I mentioned before, step 5 and 6, is synthesizing and evaluating the findings. So grouping the studies by theme. So imagine theme 1 is showing that exercise reduces stress, and theme 2 is showing that it improves sleep. So just identifying those patterns and themes are critical. And again, like I mentioned before, those gaps are very critical as well. Like if there's a lack of studies on exercise barriers for college students, then you can kind of draw conclusions and kind of say how that's not available in the literature. And the most simplified conclusion that you could possibly come up with from a research question, just an example again, the literature review takes days and hours, but just some conclusion that I came up with is regular physical activity reduces stress and anxiety, but there's gaps and more research is needed on exercise barriers specific to college students. So that would be kind of like your intro concept, and then you would have to create like a roadmap in your literature review explaining everything from all the sources that you found, and so on from there. So you finish the literature review, and now you may be asking, what do I do now? So there's kind of like 3 steps that come into play here. The first step is refining your research question. Sometimes when you complete a literature review, you may realize that your research question in the beginning was horrible. So you go back to the research question in the beginning and you refine it and you start a whole new literature review. So again, like I said, it takes a lot of time to actually have your final product done, and just kind of creating and learning from your first literature review is kind of the best thing you can do. You can also define your method, like your methods, and you can see how those methods like align with the gaps and themes that you've identified. And you can also kind of conduct surveys, you can perform analysis to existing research, and you can design just experimental studies to kind of connect everything that you've learned. You can also kind of draft your proposal and send it to UNC Journey, who knows, for submission if you think it's good and you have a mentor. And you can also identify just data sources and share and discuss with peers who can also give you feedback. Feedback is extremely critical in the literature review process. Just kind of understanding what other people have to say about your work can make you refine your work and also kind of give you more confidence on what you're doing. So before I move on, does anyone have any questions on the literature review part? I can give you guys like a minute, and then I'm going to be introducing some citation managers. All right, sounds good. I guess no questions. So now I'm going to be introducing some citation managers that will actually help you cite the sources that you find in your literature review, and then just cite sources in general, like for your classes. So the first one is Zotero, and Zotero is essentially a free open source tool that helps you kind of collect, organize, cite, and share research. So some of the key features include collecting references from websites and databases like PubMed, like UNC Articles++. And it can also help you organize your library with folders and tags. It can help you generate citations, which is its main feature, obviously, generating those citations in formats like APA and MLA. And why use Zotero? It's very time efficient and it kind of ensures consistency and accurate citations as you go through. So how to get started? I want all you guys to do this right now. Go to zotero.org to create an account and just download Zotero. And I'll give you like a minute to do that because Zotero is critical. And what I'm going to do in the next few slides is actually walk through Zotero with pictures. So if you guys have it downloaded, it's going to help if it's alongside. So I'll give you like a minute again. It shouldn't take too long. It's just zotero.org and you click download. All right, so I'll continue. So one thing you can do with Zotero is you can actually add references to Zotero itself, and you can do this through a browser connector. You can save those references directly from websites like PubMed just with one click, which I'll show you guys in the next few slides. You can also manually enter articles and books and reports manually, so you can kind of integrate everything that you want on Zotero. And you can also drag and drop PDFs because Zotero is essentially extracting metadata automatically to create those citations, and the flexibility is very easy when you put everything into one reference library. So here's an example of using Zotero with PubMed. So after kind of finding an article, once you have Zotero downloaded, you should also download the Chrome extension of it. And once you do that, it kind of you just have a drop down on like the top right of your screen, and you just click that, and it's gonna assign it to a specific folder. Like it's gonna say Unit 1 assignment, and you just click it. So like I don't know how to like show you guys, but if you have it on the top right of your screen and you find like an article on PubMed, you just click it and you just double click, and it's gonna be integrated automatically to Zotero on the actual application. So this is kind of how it's going to look like. The Zotero library interface allows you to kind of view and organize all your references by folders and tags. And it's going to allow you to kind of edit citation details like the author title or anything that you need. Like on the right of this, you can see like all the metadata of that specific article. So like if you want to know who the author is, if you want to know anything about the source that you have, and you can't find it, one way you can do it is just putting it in Zotero and seeing if you can find what you need just by looking at the metadata. And you can also access PDFs and notes attached to those references. And it's just essentially like a streamlined interface that simplifies the research process. Like this was my library when I was in my public health class with all the resources that I kind of accumulated when I was doing a literature review. And they all were just appearing in this library. So like what I had in the previous slide would appear here in the library. And once a reference is actually saved, Zotero allows you to access the full text PDF or PubMed Central link. And this feature kind of allows you to always have quick access to the original source material. So like if you're offline and you're on like a road trip or something and you're doing a literature review, you can just click full text PDF and you can see your PDF. And Zotero also supports annotations directly within the interface. You can actually, like I said, if you're on a road trip or something and you want to highlight key points on the PDF, you can add notes for future reference. You can highlight right away. And this functionality kind of makes Zotero more than just a reference manager. It kind of becomes like your research assistant, and it's just a streamlined process overall. So again, the key organization features is the folders and subfolders. You can create specific folders for your classes, for your assignments, where you can put all the references in your literature review into one folder. You can have specific tags that kind of show the specific things that you want to look at. And the search bar within Zotero also makes it easy for you to kind of locate your references in your library. And a pro tip would be to use save searches to automatically update your collections based on the specific criteria that you're looking for. Essentially what I showed you in the previous slides in library. And now the main thing that I mentioned before, having Zotero as your citation manager. So I started by introducing its other functionalities, but the main functionality is to obviously create citations. And what you need to essentially do is you need to use Word or the Google Docs plugin. So once you download it, I'll show you guys in the next slide how it's going to show up on Google Docs or Word. And it's actually going to automatically format your citations in whatever style you want, APA, MLA, or Chicago. And then you can create a bibliography at the end with all your sources. And whatever citation style that you want, you can customize it in your Zotero settings to make sure it meets your needs. So right here, imagine you have a document with a long research paper. I just have a few sentences for your reference, but obviously you're gonna have a much longer research paper. And you see on the top right, just a little circle right there. That's actually Zotero, and it's integrated into your Google Docs. And you need to use the toolbar to insert in-text citations directly into your document. And the bibliographies that I was mentioning before actually update, like they update in the background by itself as you add or remove citations. It kind of streamlines the whole writing process into one thing. It's kind of working in the back end. So like I mentioned before again, Zotero supports a variety of citation styles from APA to Chicago. And to kind of see which citation style that you want to do depending on your class, you can access the document preferences menu to select your preferred style. And you can also enable automatic updates to ensure that your citations, like if you're doing a specific citation, it actually reflects the one that you want. And depending on what class your teacher wants, I know that a majority of my UNC classes wanted to use AMA, especially in Gillings. Like if you're in the public health school, like a lot of them want to use AMA. So I'm gonna do a quick walkthrough of me doing it in AMA. So after I click AMA, the top picture is what it's gonna ask me. It's gonna ask me which source I want to have for my AMA citation. And once I click a source, it's gonna give me a superscript to the sentence where I want to insert it. So what that superscript number that I actually click is connected to the Zotero source because that's what I chose for. So that's shown in the picture below. That 1 and 2 that you see superscripted after those sentences is actually sources that I assigned it. And when you make Zotero kind of connect, when you connect those sources with Zotero, when you create your bibliography at the end, it's again in that Google Docs toolbar. You're going to click Add or Edit Bibliography to generate that whole formatted list that you just did. And this is going to ensure that all your references are consistently cited and they're saving time on formatting. And then it's just like that. You click Add Bibliography, and every little source that you assign to the number automatically populates and pastes under bibliography. So it's just that easy. It's very time efficient, and it just saves so much time on formatting. You don't have to go one by one citing each source if Zotero just does everything at once with your literature review in the background. So does anyone have any questions on Zotero before I move on? I'll give you guys like a minute or two. All right. So if you're someone like me who prefers to go one step at a time and kind of ensure that each citation is reviewed and organized, then I would say that MyBib is like the perfect tool because it kind of combines simplicity with precision. And MyBib is just, I feel like everyone knows, like there's a lot of them. It's like EasyBib, MyBib, like from high school. They're just user-friendly citation generators for quick and accurate citations. And it's perfect for like projects where you just want to get it done. Like it's not like a literature review, it's just a little project to cite stuff. And it's unlike Zotero, which is like a comprehensive reference manager. MyBib is like for small tasks. Like it's just for citing. Like Zotero is like actually like a research assistant, but MyBib is just for like quick tasks. And the features include like support for multiple citation styles, real-time previews, and just a streamlined interface. Kind of basic things. Here's a picture of how it looks, the clean interface of it. You can easily create a project, you can add citations, and just organize your overall bibliography. And the add citation button obviously allows you to include references in the style of your choice. And this is a lot better than Zotero in my opinion for the citations for the citation aspect because you can double check each citation step by step. And this layout is just a lot like cleaner. It's on the website. It's just a lot easier. Just kind of doing a little walkthrough. Imagine I found this source on an NIH website. I really like it and I want to incorporate it in my project. So to add the citation, you're going to click add new citation and you're going to paste the URL and the manual input options. And then MyBib's going to do all the work. It's going to fetch all the relevant metadata and then display the citation format instantly. I'm pretty sure everyone has done this in high school, so it's kind of easy to do. It's really an excellent feature for just verifying details before adding them to your project. So yeah. And once you've added the citation, you can organize, edit, or even attach notes for each entry. And MyBib kind of ensures that flexibility in your references. So like if you're like detail oriented, this tool kind of helps you organized while also allowing you to kind of cross-check every single little step. And you can also change the citation type on the top as well. And if you want to ensure like every citation is entered properly, this is the best thing to do. So I kind of recommend it for like little projects. So that's kind of all for the literature review and citation crash course. Like if anyone has any questions at all, I'll give you guys one more chance because no one has any questions. But I'll still wait a minute, and once I wait that minute, I'll introduce UNC Journey, and then I'll end the session after I introduce it. So I'll give you guys a minute for questions on anything. All right, I guess I'll continue. So shifting gears, I'm going to introduce UNC Journey now, which I'm a part of, and I'm hosting this session for. So you guys who want to be future researchers can actually contribute to UNC and make an impact by joining. So UNC Journey is actually the Journal of Undergraduate Research at UNC Chapel Hill. It's an annual student-run publication that showcases faculty-mentored undergraduate research, and the disciplines covered are very various. They can be natural sciences, social sciences, humanities, and the mission of UNC Journey is to essentially celebrate and support original research, and it's just to foster like interdisciplinary connections and discussions for all students at UNC. So I highly recommend joining, even as an editor or on the publicity team, or just actually submitting a research paper if you want to make an impact in any way in the research community at UNC. So some benefits for students, obviously just gaining experience in the academic publication process. You're kind of seeing how the publication process really works if you're submitting a paper. You're also enhancing your academic portfolio and resume, which is obviously something that's really good for all students. And you're contributing to UNC and leaving an impact. And the types of submissions that are accepted, here are just some of them. There can be independent research projects. It could be a partial or full honors thesis, which is usually done senior year, so that won't really apply. Or it could just be serfs, which are just done over the summer. It could be really anything that you're really passionate about. And the submission guidelines, eligibility, you just got to be an undergraduate student at UNC, so I'm pretty sure all of you guys are eligible. And the requirements are it has to be faculty mentored independent work. It has to adhere to like MLA, APA, just some specific style. And then the cover page has to be author's name, class year, and major. All this is obviously on the UNC Journey website. You just search up UNC Journey and you'll get all the eligibility. And I know the deadline for the paper for this year is today. So this is for next year. This is for all you future researchers for next year. And yeah, submitting the files, you guys should do it with a doc or docx. The submissions are reviewed anonymously based on just accuracy and proper referencing. And the decisions are communicated in March to April of 2025. Or, I mean, obviously it wouldn't be 2025 this year. It'd be 2026 if you do it for next year. And the accepted papers are published in the spring edition. So yeah, you guys can see yourself in the spring of next year if you want to submit a paper. So yeah, here's the CLE credit code. I finished like 7 minutes early, so you guys should stick around and ask me questions because you guys have a lot of them. So I'll wait. So thank you guys for coming though. Someone had a question that said, I think this is just to me, so no one really saw it. How long does a well-written research article for UNC Journey take, or does it vary by discipline? So I would say it varies by discipline, and it honestly just depends on how much you meet your faculty mentored, I mean your faculty mentor, and I guess just varies like that. Like it could take months, it could take a while though. I would say you have to be pretty dedicated to it to actually ensure that it goes well. I think sometimes the code doesn't work if you don't RSVP for the event on Heal Life. I'm not sure. It worked for me, so.